Believe in Everything Auburn is brought to you by Bet Online. The holiday season is off and rolling with NFL in full stride and the NBA, NHL hitting mid-season form. Bet Online is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info with the up to the minute sports wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions that you need. Bet Online is the top spot for everything pro and amateur sports. And it's not just the big four. Bet Online has info available at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access at any time for almost any sport that is played, MMA, even to international soccer. So head to the Bet Online website today and remember to use our promo code Bleav for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That is BLEAV, Bet Online, where the game starts. War Eagle, everyone. Welcome. Oh, no. Oh no, y'all. We can't even get through the dang intro and I've already lost my co-host. If you're not watching on YouTube, you probably should be because our expressions are going to tell it all. But nonetheless, welcome to Bleav in Everything Auburn. I'm Taylor Davis. He's a very upset Jason Campbell, but we're here and we're going to do our jobs as we do. It was amazing until it wasn't in the last minute or so of this year's Iron Bowl. The 10-year anniversary of the kick six, and it seems like some magic was once again present, but it went the other way this time. Unfortunately, the Tigers narrowly lost to Alabama at home in our regular season finale, 27-24. But I would love to hear your take on it as someone who was not able to be there in person, seeing the videos and the photos. It seems like it was the best representation of an Auburn football game day environment that you could have had. And on the heels of a really embarrassing New Mexico State loss at home, it could have gone the other way. You could have seen a disgruntled, lackluster fan base, but that's not what you got. You got it reiterated to you that the Auburn family, the Auburn faithful are still strong and this thing is headed in the right direction. So I would love to get your take on the good before we kind of talk about why it unfortunately ended the way it did.
Whew. Let me take a deep breath for a second, but I would like to say this though. It was a tale of two different weeks. And the
Totally.
weekend before we played New Mexico State, we had no energy. We didn't show up. And fast forward 7 days later, the atmosphere is electric. People showed up, they showed out. It was just loud and
Mhm.
exactly what you want from an Iron Bowl type of game with all the energy and everything. And you couldn't tell that it was an embarrassing loss the week before because
Mhm.
the Iron Bowl just kind of the energy was just there. And from a standpoint of this, Alabama scored first. We come out the first series, we get the ball. I'm always telling you I like getting the ball first because I
Right.
think you get a chance to get in rhythm offensively early. But we went 3 and out, and then Alabama gets the ball, and they go down the field and they score. And you didn't hear fans getting rattled. You didn't hear people getting gruntled. We get the ball back again. We go
Mhm.
3 and out again. And, everyone just kinda stayed patient. And then, of course, Alabama scored another touchdown, got called back for holding and everything, so that ended up helping us out. But then the next time we drove the ball down the field. And in that series, Taylor, is when I think our offense and our team realized we can beat these guys. Because in that
Mhm.
series was we started just pounding the rock, and they couldn't stop it. And it was just
Yeah.
Jarquez right, Jarquez left, and then it was Damari Alston right, Damari Alston left, and we was just going downhill to hill at them to a team that's only giving up 117 yards per game on average in the rush.
Yeah.
And then we
Mhm.
rushed the ball for over 260 net, but then a couple of sacks brought it down to 244. But you're
Yep.
talking about we doubled the yardage in rushing the football against a defensive front that has Dallas Turner, all these big guys up front. Like,
Yeah.
that was a group right there. But we did what we had to do. We stayed out of passing situation where these guys peel their ears back and they come after the quarterback like they did at the end of the game when they forced the fumble. But more than that, we neutralized them because we could run the football. And that's the thing
Right.
about this team. It showed a lot of heart. It showed a lot of redemption, which is what we wanted to see. And I know their hearts were broken. So was all of us that was pulling for these guys, especially the senior class, to go out on a
I
high note,
know.
beating Alabama, and you have them, and it that 4th and 31, it hurts in a lot of different ways just because, you can say, "Well, we coulda rushed more than 2," or you can say, "We coulda done this or done that." But all of that is just to say, like, "Hey, you still gotta give credit where credit is due." You give Miro too much time to stand in the pocket, and you're taught as an offense when you're going through game plans is it get to this situation. The best thing you can do for an offense is rush 2 or 3. Reason I
Yeah.
say that is they can pass off the block, the quarterback can buy 7, 8 seconds, allow your receivers to run deep into the end zone, and then peel back out towards the pylon. That's a natural play in that situation. And the reason that
Mhm.
is the where he was going with the football the entire time is because you think defensively, everybody think it's gonna be a Hail Mary pass to the middle of the field. No,
Yeah.
that's not what it's gonna be. So if you watch Miro, he eyes to the right and he eyes to the middle to keep everybody holding that way, but knowing his one-on-one matchup was backside between Isaiah Bond and DJ James. That was his one-on-one.
Mm.
And he did that and held everybody where he wanted him to until the last second. And he was able to hit Isaiah throwing that ball high enough for him to peel away from DJ and come down with the
Yep.
ball. That's the only reason I don't like rushing 2 or 3 because if you
Sure.
pressure him a little more, the ball's gotta come out quicker and you can rally and tackle.
I was thinking from a quarterback's perspective, you probably breathe a sigh of relief when you see that that's what a defense has
Mhm.
chosen to do. But I mean, Coach Freeze stood by the call and said he doesn't have a problem with that decision. And ultimately, you have to go with what you think is best in that moment. And we also all know the major implication that the muffed punt had a little bit before that to even set them up in a situation like that. And it was brutal right there at the end. But I think what you realize is but then it's kind of contradicted when you look at New Mexico State the week before. I really still don't know how to make sense of that one. I'm very
Yeah.
confused by that because when you look at the Georgia game, when you look at the Alabama game, even Ole Miss, some of the top
Mhm.
teams in the country, the margin for error was very small. I mean, like, we're not getting absolutely destroyed in these situations against the top tier talent, the
Mhm.
upper echelon of college football in the country. But what you see is when it comes down to those margins of error, when it comes down to that one or two play, those that one or two moments of execution, the great teams are the ones that capitalize, and the ones that aren't quite there yet are the ones that crumble. And I think that that was on display. I think over the course of this season, you saw Auburn is closer than we probably thought
Mhm.
we would be, and definitely closer than a lot of critics thought we would be, but not quite there yet. And when you're looking at the situation, 4th and 31, backs against the wall, they've struggled in this game. Part of you thought they're going to pull it off. Or at least part of
Mhm.
me thought that because it's what they've built. It's what they've been built to do. These
Right.
kinds of moments, Bama knows how to execute. The really great teams, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the ones that have stayed at the top for a long time. It's not always dominating wins. It's really scrappy, ugly wins. And when the moment comes, you rise to it. It's not too big. That's ultimately what it came down to. And I think that distinction, if we took one thing away from this season, I think it's a little bit of an indicator of we're actually kind of close.
Yeah, we're close, and the schedule's getting harder. That's the
Mhm.
that's the thing about it. Next year you get Oklahoma and you get Missouri on the schedule. Two teams that are trending upwards right now.
Sure.
But I think for Auburn, the best thing they did was they showed so much heart and fight. There was over 80 recruits at this game and about 10 5 stars, which I don't really.
Blah, blah, blah.
Uh, yeah, I like to say
I
any
don't care.
guys that compete when they get to a certain level. I think it had a major impact and a major implications on how they look at Auburn.
I
They don't no
agree.
longer look at Auburn as like, oh man, they won 3 in a row, but then they lost to New Mexico State. Like, I think they now look at it and say they got caught overlooking a New Mexico State team.
Right.
Because if you look at the Auburn team that played Saturday and the team that played against New Mexico State, it's like two totally
Night
different
and
football
day.
teams.
Mhm.
And real good teams know how to win those games week in and week out. That's
Yep.
the difference right now, and that's what we're learning. This football team is in a learning phase where they have to develop the winning attitude. Taylor, they haven't won in the last 4 years, like, a lot. You
I
know,
know.
it's what I think we haven't won more than 6 games or something like that in 4 years. So, you're talking about that's not Auburn, so
Mhm.
you gotta reintroduce the winning mindset, and the other thing is you gotta know how to win. See, Bama, Georgia, these teams, they know how to win. When the
Yep.
game's last 5 minutes to go in these ball games, and the game they're down 3 or they're tied up, you're taught all of these situational football aspects during practice, you go through all of it, but the one thing that you can't teach is the experience in game-like situations. You can
Right.
do it Monday through Thursday when there's no pressure, no one's there. But when those lights come on and those moments happen, can you do it then? That comes from
Exactly.
actually physically doing that in games where you won games that way. And
Yep.
we haven't beat the Georgia and the Bamas that way in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, we had them beat at home and we
Mhm.
lost off a situational play. If we stay in bounds, we run more time off the clock. Bama uses their timeout, we probably win that game. So that's the tough part about this is we lost games where we didn't get beat. We actually beat them. We just didn't beat them on the scoreboard because we lost in the
Mhm.
situational part of it.
Yeah.
And people don't realize this too. As a punt returner, and everyone has to apologize, even myself and Andy, we have to apologize because everyone thought it was Keontae
It was
Scott back there.
Keontae. I know. Even
Yeah.
Hugh
So
did.
yeah. So everyone thought it was Keontae because they both were 0. The
Yeah.
biggest difference about that is if you're a punt returner, you get used to seeing the ball come off the foot of the punter. And when you seeing that
Mhm.
ball come off the foot, you have a feel for where the ball is going. You know how to feel that punt. In that situation. If you just come off the sideline and you are now into that position, I don't know if Keontae was hurt. I still don't know yet if he was
I was
injured
wondering.
or what, or why he wasn't out there in that situation. But if you come out there in that type of situation, you haven't feel that this kid's punt the entire game, and then
Right.
all of a sudden on that one, it's like it's coming at you. Then at the end, it kind of comes a little shorter. Then you try to run up
Mhm.
and catch it, and then you lose your footing. That's the other part. You're not used to the footing because you haven't played much in the game. He didn't even go in the game as much as a
Yeah.
receiver. So he's not used to the footing, and you
Oh.
lose your foot while you're trying to catch the ball, and then it squeaks out, and Bama recovers it. All those things, details, little things, it matters. And everybody always say, yes, you joke around about it, or it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter until it does. And then
Yeah.
you like, oh, it's time to take these things serious. But this is a great learning curve for this football team. I'm still broken for these kids because it's pulling so hard for them, especially after you lost to
I
New
know.
Mexico State. This would kind of like you can't erase that, but it would have showed that, hey, that's not us. We
Mhm.
didn't show up that week. We overlooked them. Let's just be honest. But
Yeah.
you lose a game like this, it's just like, man, like that would have been a great pick me up for these kids.
Huge. The more
Mhm.
times you're in those circumstances, the more you rep it, the more intense situations that you're in, when you're really playing for a lot like they have
Mhm.
been in the last 87 years, you have that kind of mentality of this one won't slip away. Somehow, some way, we figure it out. That's what we do. Auburn's got to establish themselves as that. We're not yet, but I think that this games like that, games like Georgia, where you can look at it and it is small, minuscule adjustments that would have gotten the win, but they're very much attainable. You've got to
Mhm.
be hungry for that. If you weren't already, now to have that taste of it was within our grasp in year one. So
Mhm.
imagine when we have a little more time. Imagine when we get a little more talent, when we start developing guys our way, what this thing could look like. So, as debilitating and deflating as it was, I also think in a way it really lit a fire because it was very much within reach in year one. Kirby Smart actually was asked about it in one of his press
Mhm.
conferences ahead of the SEC championship. Someone alluded to, you know, your opponent is kind of limping to the finish line. And Kirby was like, don't talk to me about playing at Auburn. Like that is a different animal. And I'm glad that that's not
Yeah.
some bias that we have some crazy environment. No,
No.
the top two coaches in the nation will tell you there's something different about playing them there. But when we look at this season as a whole, and obviously when, we still have a bowl game ahead, but you never know these days what that's going to look like, who's going to actually play, and all of that. So when you
Yes.
look at this season, yeah, don't get me started on that conversation. But when you look at this season as a whole, what did you learn about this coaching staff in particular? And obviously led by Hugh Freeze, it had its changes over the course of
Mhm.
season. It had its adjustments, and there were some close calls that ultimately didn't go our way. But like we've said, you saw progress and you saw glimpses of what it could be. So with the first season in the rearview mirror, what did they build on from here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, that's a really great question. When I think about this season and this coaching staff is we're still a young football team, and we
Mhm.
lost a lot of tough games against some very, very good opponents. It's no coincidence that Kirby Smart said what he said about playing Auburn in Auburn when
Yeah,
you're their arch rival. That is a different animal, and
it
a
is.
lot of people don't understand that until you actually been to the game or you participated or you covered the game, you'll know. I think for Coach Freeze, I think he learned more about Auburn this year than what he
I
thought
agree.
he knew.
Mhm.
You know, like you can think you know certain things, but then once you get there, you're actually in the thick of it. Now you learn a lot more. So I think for him, that was a big plus because he'll know how to adapt continuously as they move forward. From a
Right.
player perspective, is we learned a lot about our needs, what we need moving forward as a football team. Like, we got to create pass rush. That's one thing. Consistent play at quarterback is another thing. Got to
Mhm.
have playmakers on the outside of receiver position. You got to have
Yes.
those guys that can catch the ball. You got to have guys that can get yak after catch.
Create separation
We
in routes.
Right, create separation routes. We understand that with a veteran offensive line, we can run the football. Now
Yep.
we just got to learn a little bit better in pass protection. We can get better in
Mhm.
pass protection. But that you're talking about a group of guys where you probably lose Gunnar Britt and you probably lose Avery Jones, but then you still got a buck of your guys coming back. That's a big
Sure.
plus. So I think getting that valuable experience together with those guys up front was huge. For his coaching staff, I think it'll be interesting to see how him and Coach Montgomery continue here because
Me too.
I like Coach Montgomery. He's a good person and
Same.
everything. I think, and I think he may get to the point where he said, "Hey, I can help implement the plays. I can help, be the offensive coordinator. Hey, you can call the plays. Go ahead, you call them."
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
maybe they get back to that because I know as a head coach, Gus tried it numerous times to say, "All right, I'm letting, Rhett Lashley call it or,
They
somebody else
can't.
call it." But it's just hard. You know what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
competitive comes out of you. You're used to calling what you're calling because play call is not like I just see something. It's a feel too. Like you have
Totally.
to go off of what you're feeling and what you're trying to set up later in the game. And I think, as much as you try to take your hands off of it, I think you're best fit for why you got the head coaching jobs is because of your play calling and how you were able to dial up certain things in certain moments that help your team be victorious. So
Right.
we'll see what happens with that. Does that transpire in the offseason? Does Hugh go back to play calling? I think defensively, like you said, I thought the guys got after it for most part of this year. Like I said, 2 games we just we didn't show up. LSU and New Mexico
Yeah.
State, but against our rivals, we showed up. Against Ole Miss, we
Mhm.
showed up. Defensively, they've had a really, really good year. I think they win so many
Texas
games. I think,
A&M
yeah, Texas A&M, yeah,
was the
they
only
shut them out. They're
touchdown.
6-3, yeah, on touchdown. So defensively, this was a really, really good team. I'm excited about the young corners that we have. I'm excited
Yeah.
about some of the young safeties that we have. Um, I think we can get more depth at the linebacker position. Most
Mhm.
definitely. You need more depth at the linebacker position. So all these things with the transfer portal, with high school kids coming out now, you can change things quickly nowadays.
You
Now,
can.
people can look at that on paper, but Taylor, it also comes down to the right fit. And the
I know.
reason I say that is there's a certain guys who signed this past year, and it just didn't. We thought it was going to work out, and it didn't fit. Nick Martiner from Cincinnati, 6'6"
Yeah,
receiver. We didn't hardly
that's
see him this
true.
year.
That is
Jair
true.
Shorter tore it up at North Texas. For
Mhm.
whatever reason, started the first couple of games, kind of trended out. Didn't see him as much this year. So there's just so you can sign different guys, but at the end of the day, you still have to make sure they fit in your
Yeah.
program.
Well, and it's one thing to show enough to where a coach is interested in getting you to a new program, but then you still have to continue showing things in being coachable, in being developed,
Mhm.
in taking leadership roles, whatever they need you to be. And not everyone assimilates as well. I think that it actually is a challenging thing, the whole transfer element of it, because you get there to a pre-established group and have to find your fit. And some guys really thrive, Elijah McAllister, and some don't and kind of get lost in the shuffle. So that will continue to be a talking point of the transfer portal as long as it's around. And speaking of, the chaos ensues on December 4th. So next week, the
Yeah.
winter transfer portal window will open. Pray for all college football head coaches because December is insane. Like, I really don't I don't envy their situation in the month of December because it is so chaotic. Now, granted, they're making the money to make up for it, but it is a very tough time of year, especially for the coaches that are still playing in postseason or the ones that have taken on new head coaching jobs, which we will get to in just a moment. But continuing to kind of put a bow on Auburn's regular season, you mentioned some of the positions that will need to be added to as season or as the off season ensues. A couple guys that are expected to depart already: defensive lineman, I don't even know how to say his name. Enos? Anise?
Oh, I edge.
Ines? Whatever.
Yeah.
Sledge. He has announced his plan to transfer, and reports came out this morning that wide receiver Omari Kelly is likely to enter
Mhm.
the portal as well. Will not be surprised to see several more names. I think a lot of people fully expect that Robbie Ashford may depart. Quarterback movement will likely continue. I also want to issue a quick correction because we have said on a prior episode that Peyton was on his final year of eligibility. That is not true.
Mhm.
He does have
Right.
another year of eligibility. After the whole COVID thing, I can't keep up. I mean, there are kids playing their 8th year of college football that I am having to cover on a weekly basis. It is insane. So Peyton Thorne does have another year of eligibility. Won't be surprised to hear that he is staying. I think that makes more sense. I don't think he did enough this year to where he could pursue the draft or anything like that. And after a year kind of getting your legs under you, it certainly would make sense to stick with it. The rest of the quarterbacks remain to be seen. Guys like Holden Gerner, Robbie Ashford, who certainly ended up on the back burner as season continued. We'll watch for that. But what kind of guy are you looking for if you're this Auburn coaching staff?
Well, you want like the season started off with them substituting Robbie and Thorne at the
Peyton.
same time. Like they
Hmm.
was just going in and out. It's kind of like it's confusing at times, and because you're trying to utilize a certain play to fit this one's ability, and the same for the other. But you kind of just want a guy that just can run every aspect of your offense without coming off the field.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to you do that as much. So that's the thing I think when it comes to this position in this offense. The other thing is accuracy. This game you play against a lot of DBs that's gonna play at the next level. And sometimes and grit. You gotta have grit to
Yeah.
play quarterback in the SEC. Like, it is a tough, tough position to play in the SEC. Like, you gotta have that grit. You gotta have that that specialness about you that can galvanize your teammates to rally
Yeah.
behind you. Where I can go to a defensive guy, I can go to a safety, I can go to the kicker, the punter, and I can get the same response because they respect you, because
Yeah.
you know how to galvanize guys as a leader. So I think that aspect of it right there is going to be the key for this football team. Whether Peyton comes back or whether someone comes in or Walker White, the high school kid that we're signing out of Arkansas,
Hmm.
he comes in January. Um, this is wherever it's going, it got to start from that leadership role, and it got to start with that mental toughness. You got to have mental toughness at this, and I do think this year was a tryout year for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, this was just a tryout year, and I know you don't wanna hear that as an Auburn fan. You know, every year you wanna be competing for a championship, but we have to be honest too, though. Like, where we were these last 2 years was, ooh, like, we didn't have an SEC roster. We weren't even close to the
Mm-mm.
SEC roster. So this roster is still being built to become an SEC roster.
Yeah.
And, that's the thing that you should be excited about, the fact that you was in the Georgia, the Alabama, and the Ole Miss game with 4 minutes to go with an opportunity to win the game, and you not even had your fully roster yet. So
Yeah.
that's, to me, that's encouraging moving forward. So yeah, so that's what I would say just from the quarterback position.
Yeah, definitely. This isn't a turnkey system. He didn't inherit
Mhm,
some well oiled machine that's just ready to continue cruising. We're having to rebuild the model. So if I'm a really highly touted kid in the portal, Auburn intrigues me because A, it's within reach, but B, they need those difference makers. So if I'm competitive and I am really confident in my talent, Auburn is such a good platform to go showcase that because you have
mhm,
all the resources, you have all the backing, you have one of the best college football experiences you could possibly have. And it's a program that's building and is looking for those difference makers. So you could come in and be that very quickly. That intrigues me if I'm one of these, highly touted guys that's in the portal. But
mm,
with some of the change has obviously come coaching changes as well. And we had spoken about the two firings happening a few weeks back. Those have both now been filled. So, wanted to get your opinion on these. Mississippi State hires Oklahoma offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby on a
mm,
5-year deal, and Texas A&M hires Duke head coach Mike Elko, who returns to College Station after having a 4-year stint as their defensive coordinator from
mhm,
2018 to 2021. Michigan State has also hired Jonathan Smith away from Oregon State to fill the
mm,
role that the Mel Tucker absence has
mm,
added to. Syracuse has fired Dino Babers. That job remains open, but I have seen stuff popping up on my phone as we've been recording that they are likely to go ahead and commit to Georgia DB coach Fran Brown as their
mm.
guy. Dan Mullen was drawing a lot of interest, and there were a lot of rumors that that was going to be the decision. But as of this hour, it looks like Fran Brown might be their guy. Indiana has fired Tom Allen. Houston has fired Dan Holgerson. The
Hey,
chaos
hey.
continues. But as far as these two
Man.
SEC openings that we had talked about, Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby and Texas A&M with Mike Elko, what are your initial thoughts on those choices?
Coach Levy coming over from Oklahoma. I think that's a good fit. And the reason I
Mhm.
say that is because Mississippi State already have players that are lined up in that offense to fit Coach Leach's system. And Coach Leach like to air it out,
Oh,
throw
yeah.
the ball all over the place. And now they try to go away from that this year with not the personnel that fits that,
That
what
was
they were
such a
trying to do.
dumb decision.
So now they go back to a coach that can kind of line up with some of the talent that they have and not have to reinvent the entire wheel, and
Right.
they can bring in a coach that can offensively get this thing back going. The interesting thing was, to me, that I saw Will Rogers enter the portal yesterday. So that kind of tells me that either Coach Levy has someone that he's bringing with him once the portal opens, and that already knows his system and already
Hmm.
knows how to operate. So that's intriguing, because if I'm Will Rogers and I see a coach come in like this that can aerate the ball and what he's done, in his all the years he's been offense coordinator,
Yep.
I'm trying to stay put.
I would
So that
think.
tells me they must have had a conversation already, and
Yeah.
that this marriage is, it's not going to get off the start. So
Right.
that was interesting. Number two, Coach Elko. I think it was good for Texas A&M to do this route because Jimbo is an offensive-minded coach. Coach Elko, I
Hmm.
believe, is a defensive-minded coach. How he was a D coordinator
Yeah.
there for a couple of years. I like this because it's a familiar face.
Yes.
It's someone that kind of knows the program. It knows how it's ran. It understands how it's been operated. You're not bringing in this totally new person
Yeah.
that's trying to fit the core of what you're trying to do. You already
He
know that
knows a
this
lot
guy
of the
can win.
guys too.
Right. Yeah, he knows a lot of the guys. He knows a lot of the everything that goes on around Texas A&M. and he
Yep.
knows how to win. He took a Duke team and turned that program into a winning program,
Yeah.
so he knows how to win. So I think him going to Duke, getting that valuable head coaching experience, and then coming back to A&M is a win-win situation. So I think they did a really good job. Dan Mullen name was mentioned back in Mississippi State, but usually you don't see
Yeah.
coaches go back to where they coached at before. So I didn't really see that one happening.
Me either.
Now there's a reason he was up in New York a lot, doing covering games and everything, and
I
maybe
thought
he ended up
Syracuse
there.
was going to happen.
Yeah, Syracuse probably came really close, but you know, I don't know. Some of these guys, when they coach at that level in the SEC, a lot of them are trying to get back to that magnitude because
That's
it's
true.
hard. It's hard to match anything other than that. It's kind of like, once you play in the NFL and then you go play in the USFL, it's not the same. You're
It's
trying to get
different.
back to the
Yeah.
NFL. It's the same thing in the SEC. Once
That's
you
true.
get in these environments and you're not playing half your schedule, you're just gonna blow teams out because they're not just good at all. In the SEC, whether you the bottom tier or the top tier,
It's
it's gonna be
true.
dog fights most Saturdays. So which makes your job more intriguing to go in there and be like, hey, I gotta dial in because we can get beat at any point because it
Right.
is so competitive. So I wasn't surprised that maybe he continued to wait it out a little bit, see what happens. But I thought Dabo would be on the move. I honestly did. I thought Dabo would be on
I
the
know you
move from
did.
Clemson. And, obviously, it looks like for now he's staying put. And I thought Mark Stoops, I think it was uh,
That was crazy. He was, look, I always know that something is serious when Pete Thamel
mhm,
talks about it. He is so credible and so relied upon. He not only put out a tweet, they did a live report on it on College Game Day Saturday morning ahead of
mhm,
the Kentucky Louisville game. So this thing had legs. This wasn't rumor. This seemed to be like the Iron Bowl. It was literally
mhm,
done, and then something fell apart at the very end. And there was a bit of an uproar from the Texas A&M faithful. They were not happy with how much, noise it was getting. I don't know if that affected the AD and if that's ultimately what made the decision, but at like 1 a.m., Mark Stoops puts out a tweet to basically silence it all. And then Mike Elko flies in the middle of the night like freaking Santa Claus and just pops up at College Station. What in the world? College football is the craziest world. I love both of these hires. I have spoken nothing but praise for Mike Elko since I covered Duke so many times last year. And I think so highly of him. And we kind of got a peek behind the curtain into what all he did at Duke as soon as he got there. I mean, he was involved in everything. He was involved in we need to hire more social media managers because we're not marketing this thing well enough. Like he had vision for all of it. And so you put him in a situation like Texas A&M that like you said, he has familiarity with already and you give him every resource imaginable that he didn't have a 16th of at Duke. I think it's a really good fit, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do there. And then Jeff Lebby, I'm excited to see that one as well. He was the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss from 20 to
mhm.
21. It was brief, but he did have some time in the SEC. He's actually Art Briles' son-in-law. So he's got a lot of ties and has been around football for a long time. He actually did have a pretty lengthy stint at Baylor when RG3 was there. So he's been around some talented quarterbacks. He's had guys like Matt Corral, Mackenzie Milton, Dylan Gabriel, guys that certainly can air it out, but also are effective scramblers and know how to extend plays really well and also be a threat with their legs. And that's not really Will Rogers' game, not really his MO. So for a second, I was like, maybe Will is going to reconsider and stay. But I think
That's just
ultimately he sees an opportunity to shake things up a little bit. I don't think that this past year was great for Will in Starkville, which is unfortunate because he is a great kid and he leaves what third all time in SEC passing yards. Like he did great things there, and it sucks that it all kind of got overlooked this past year. So maybe it's more of a need for a fresh start than a new head coach. I mean, think about what all this kid's been through. He was very close with Coach Leach. It wasn't
right.
just his coach. Like they had a very, very close relationship. So that passing and continuing to play there, and then a staff taking over and doing what they did. I just, the toughness that this kid had to have in the midst of all of that on and off the field, I don't think it's talked about enough. So maybe for him, it's more like this could be a really great situation, but I think personally, I just need a new surrounding. So you never know the
Right.
root behind it, but I'm also excited to see the results of this week's conference championships. I don't know that I've ever been this excited for all of the matchups. Obviously, the SEC is always exciting, but I feel like you always expect ACC, it's going to be Clemson, and Pac 12, I'll catch the highlights tomorrow. But this year, those matchups are interesting, specifically the Pac 12, Oregon and Washington, the rematch Friday night. Bo put on an absolute clinic last week. If he is not top two in the Heisman candidacy, then it's all rigged. Like this
Yeah,
kid,
he's definitely top 2.
like it was insane to watch him, and he still has some of that Bodini stuff that we used to see at
Mhm.
Auburn, but it's way more fine tuned. It's not as erratic as it used to be, mostly because he was running for his freaking life in Auburn, but he's so much more in control and composed and methodical while still being kind of that magician quarterback that you see guys like Pat Mahomes, implement.
Mhm.
But Washington's tough too, and they had a great game against Washington State, and they're undefeated, whereas Oregon still carries that one loss. How does that affect them? This Pac 12 championship in the final year of the Pac 12 as we know it, I think is probably going to be the best game we see this weekend.
Yeah, Pac-12 should have been patient. I really like this Pac-12 matchup. It's always tough to beat a team twice. It just is. We had to do it against in '04 against Tennessee, and the
Yeah.
first time we beat them really good. The second time was a dogfight, down to
Mm-hmm.
the end. We started off fast, and they called back, and it's just hard to beat a team twice. But in order to win
Yeah.
championships, sometimes you got to do it. You just have to. The last couple of weeks, Oregon has been playing better. Imma have to go with or I like both quarterbacks in this matchup. 2 veteran both of them
Yeah.
5-year starters in college, as 2
And
veterans
vying
you're
for
gonna
the
get.
same thing.
Right, vying for the same thing, so I like that matchup. Imma have to go with Oregon based off defense. I like their
Yeah.
defense better than Washington defense, and the fact
Okay.
that you lost to 'em the first time, it's just something in you that just you wanna settle this thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going Oregon as well. That's my team that I have just been on that bandwagon all season. Okay, ACC championship, not the participators that we see every year. Florida State against Louisville. Obviously, Florida State losing Jordan Travis in heartbreaking fashion. We had them on upset alert a little bit in Gainesville
Mhm.
this past weekend, but they dug deep. They took care of business, defeating the Gators. They remain undefeated and head down to try and attain a title against a Louisville team that has had a lot of momentum under Jeff Brom this year, has pulled off some big wins, but lost to Kentucky this past weekend. So I think this one loses a little bit of glimmer because Louisville lost to Kentucky, a team that has been very up and down this season. If they beat Florida State is out. I don't think
Mm.
that you can put a one loss Florida State if their loss is to Louisville, who lost two, one of which being to Kentucky. So if Florida State slips in this one, I think it opens up one of the final four. So I think that adds intrigue to this game. But I do think I'm going to go with the Knowles. I think even without Jordan Travis, they've got enough star power, and they didn't come this far to not at least end up with a conference title.
Yeah, I'm looking down at some stuff. Florida State's defensive line is tough. Like, they
Very.
they're a tough. This game lost some luster. It's almost like last year's SEC championship where
Yep.
LSU took the loss, took the magnitude off the game because they lost to A&M before they
Totally
played
agree.
Georgia, which would have they were still in the playoff hunt. This is how this one feels. It feels the same as that aspect. So we'll see what happens in this game. But I like Florida State winning this game. I really hate that Travis got hurt.
Me
You,
too.
you want to have all your guys. I hate for a team to feel like they're getting punished because their star player, one of their
I
star
know.
players, is out. and that's kinda how this feels. They can say what they wanna say that that's not the case, but that is the case,
It
and,
really
so we'll
is.
see what happens, but this still is gonna be a really good game.
The Big 12 championship will be Texas against Oklahoma State. Texas, obviously, with the edge right now over Alabama. We obviously are already talking about what could potentially happen if Alabama beats Georgia. Does that mean no SEC team gets in, or do they put Alabama in? But
Mm.
Alabama will have the one loss to Texas, but Texas needs to take care of business against Oklahoma State for their argument to completely be validated. And then ultimately, the SEC championship will play into that as well. I do think they take care of business. Oklahoma State has been incredibly inconsistent. They got pummeled by UCF, but they beat Kansas. They beat Oklahoma. It's just been a very weird season for them. And while I think it may be, an intriguing game at the beginning, I think I'm going to go Texas.
This is another intriguing matchup because it's one of those games where last week I thought Texas did a really good job against Texas Tech of handling
Mm-hmm.
business. Like, they didn't get caught looking ahead. And I think in this game, Oklahoma State, though, if they could show up the way that they showed up against Oklahoma, this could be a
Yeah.
game. This could
Yeah.
definitely be a game. Anytime it comes to conference championship games, you're pretty much gonna get the other team's best shot. Who has the most pressure on them in this situation? It's Texas.
Totally.
Oklahoma State has nothing to lose. So
That's
they can come
true.
out there and just let everything go. They could just throw the kitchen sink. Texas, you gotta almost over prepare. You gotta prepare for
Yeah.
fake punts, just different things like that. Like New Mexico State, when they came to Auburn, they hit us with that fake punt. Like at midfield, they didn't care. They had nothing to lose. Oklahoma State is like, hey, people didn't even want us in this position. They wanted a rematch between Oklahoma and Texas. But guess what?
Yeah.
We beat Oklahoma, so we earned the right to be in this position.
So
Now
true.
there is a championship that we can get, but the pressure's on Texas. How does
Yeah.
Texas handle this pressure, knowing that Alabama's breathing down their necks as well? Because whatever happens in this SEC championship game, if Bama wins, they can say what they want to say. How do you not put them in? And I and
I
I can't
agree.
stand I can't stand them at all. But I'm a realist. When you look at their schedule and everything, and you look at who they had to beat their last 2 games. Like, you had to beat a Jaden Daniels offense that was just phenomenal this year against
Right.
LSU. And then you come to Auburn, which is one of the hardest places to win against your arch rival, and you pretty much had to claw everything and got fortunate enough to win that game at the end.
Yeah.
And then if you beat Georgia, which is basically I call a home game for Georgia because it's in Atlanta,
Right.
and everybody probably started buying their tickets halfway through the season because they just knew Georgia gonna win the SEC East.
Yeah.
It's gonna be 70% Georgia fans and 30% Bama fans. So if you win that game in that hostile environment, how do you keep them out? Like, I don't know how you keep them out. Like, you
I
just can't.
agree. That would be the best win that anyone has had in college football in the past 2 years. This team has
Right.
gone on a winning streak. They've won 2 consecutive national championships, and you beat them on the conference championship stage. I don't think you can rival a more compelling win that Alabama would come in and attain. However, I think it gets a little weird if Alabama wins, I would almost think you would want Texas to win, but then obviously Texas gets one of the 4 over you because they're
Mhm.
undefeated. But if Texas gets beat by Oklahoma State, then that loss to them looks uglier.
Well, my thing is if Texas wins and Alabama wins, yes, they're gonna go to the head to head, but logically though, you just beat the number 1 team in the country.
I know. I
Now,
still
you
think
know what
that
I'm saying?
trumps.
Right. You know what I'm saying? It's like you beat the number 1 team in the country, and not that you only beat them, you beat them in their state,
Mhm.
which is pretty much a home game. Now, the other aspect of this is if Bama beats Georgia and is only 27-24, how do you keep Georgia out of the top 4? They
When
ran the
that's their
table
only loss.
and they played in a championship game, and that's their only loss. How are you gonna punish them for playing an extra game? Like,
That's
and you're
so
playing an
true.
extra
We're not
you're playing
requiring that yet.
right, and you're playing an extra game against a top 10 opponent. It's not like you're playing an extra game against a 15 or 20 ranked team. You're playing against a top 10 opponent and probably one of the teams that's
Dang.
playing the best football of top 5 teams in the country. So now where does Oregon and Washington stands at? So if Oregon beats Washington, of
Y'all.
course, they move in front of them. But if Washington beats Oregon, they have to stay at number 4. Now, Michigan, who's Michigan? Well, we ain't got to that one yet, but as soon as we get to
No.
Michigan,
Yeah.
so this thing can get chaotic here real quick. That's why I'm glad
Yeah.
we're expanding the playoffs because it
Same.
settles all of this.
That will be a very interesting thing to see what the committee prioritizes because it feels like every year they're prioritizing something different. But that's why,
Mhm.
like, give me an expanded playoff or give me death. Like, I'm so over all of this opinion based decision making. Let them duke it
Uh,
out, let them go. Like,
right, right.
it's just the natural answer to all of it, especially as conferences continue to
Mm.
do whatever the frick they're doing. Okay, so Big Ten, probably the least compelling of all of them. Michigan against Iowa. Iowa, who
Yeah,
plays very good defense. I mean,
right.
that's the most low scoring games all season. I saw somebody at the Nebraska Iowa game, they had sweatshirts that said punt because that's pretty much what you see in an Iowa game. And Michigan did take care of business this past week. A crazy game, though, very
Yeah.
close.
This is not gonna be a lopsided game like most people think it is
Mhm.
because it's a dangerous game for Michigan because Iowa plays really good defense. Michigan runs the football. They didn't
Right.
throw a football for a whole half of a game, you
Well,
know,
you
a
like
couple weeks
quorum, you
ago.
don't have to.
Right. So my thing is if you Iowa, you just line up and you do what
Mhm.
you do from a defensive standpoint, say, hey, you guys gotta throw the ball because we're not gonna
Yeah.
let you run the ball. If you beat us to passing the ball, fine, be it. But we're not gonna let you run the ball. So it makes this game really intriguing because why? I go back to New Mexico State and Auburn. I know I'm tired of talking about it, but I go back to that. New Mexico State was a defense that was giving up 30 some points a game their first 3 games of the season. After that, they only allowed 17 points a game thereafter.
Yeah.
So Iowa is a type of defense that they want to stronghold you and play slow ball, slow the game down as slow as possible, make you do things you don't want to do. They're going to make Michigan do what they don't want to do and put the ball in the air, and
Yeah.
they're going to live by that. So this is a dangerous game because of that. They could slow play it and play great defense. And if you're like Auburn, you're used to running the football. They shut our run game down. We had to get into a passing mode, and we couldn't do it.
Right.
So this game can be very, very intriguing. So people don't sleep on this Big Ten matchup.
I would agree with that. And look, their championship was last weekend, honestly. Like
Mhm.
that game, we all saw the game day features. That game is talked about year round. It is plastered all over their buildings. That is what they play for every year. Now you add
Mhm.
in that whichever one won is still in the playoff hunt and the other one's completely out. That had every ounce of their motivation, their focus, their energy. How do you get that juiced again against an Iowa team where the expectation is it's kind of like us against New Mexico State
Mhm.
and the opposite of Iron Bowl was the week after. Like, how do you match that level of intensity and focus in back to back weeks? Like, it is
Well, you got Harbaugh coming. Coach Harbaugh is coming back.
coming
So
back.
so that brings a different aspect and then experience at that as well as knowing how to motivate guys to not
Yeah, no.
overlook a team because this can be a sandwich game between them looking ahead to the playoffs.
Who's your pick in Michigan, Iowa?
Oh, that's Michigan.
Same.
I
Okay.
think
So
it's
we
Michigan.
hyped that up to go, Michigan. Okay. We really sold
Oh,
it though.
hey, we
We really
analyzed it
sold
though,
it.
so people
We
that,
did.
yeah,
I think it
right.
could be closer than expected. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Okay, SEC championship, Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, Alabama, Georgia. Georgia's love to run the football as well. Bama loves to run the football. When it comes to passing the game, Beck has been solid when they asked to pass the ball. Same thing for Milrow. Ever since after the Texas game and he set out the USF game, he has been
Mhm.
maturing in the passing game. And it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like no moment is too big for him. Both of these quarterbacks come in with inexperience playing in championship games. So
True.
this is going to be a matchup where between these two quarterbacks, who protects the football, who makes the best decisions, and who understands to live to see another down. Don't try to force something that's not there. You're gonna have two really good defenses. You have two really good defensive fronts that can get after the quarterback in passing situations, and who can neutralize the run game. Auburn was able to run the ball on both of these defenses, and and I'm talking about at will. We ran the ball against
Yeah.
Georgia at will. We ran the ball against Bama at will. So
So
one of
true.
these teams' defenses and their coordinators looking at like, hey, how do we run the ball against them the same way the Auburn ran the ball against us?
Yeah.
Because now they have film to look at both. So whoever gives up the running attack is going to take the downfall in this game. I'm gonna go with Georgia in this game just because that one domino effect brought Bowers. It's just
Yeah.
he's a tight end, but he's bigger than just a tight end. He plays
I
like a
know.
receiver. He causes your linebackers and safeties to have to get out of position because you have to account for him each and every play. And it helps your run game if you're Georgia because you can't allow Brock Bowers to get to the second level behind
Yep.
those linebackers and safety because you're being too nosy on the run game. So I like Georgia in this matchup just from that simple fact alone. Now, Bama will create pressures to try to knock Beck off his spot. That's what Saban
Right.
does. Kirby has not fared well against Bama when it comes to these championship games. And history has said that. So this is a game where the predecessor is going against the boss, So we'll see how this one shapes up. But he's gotten by the last couple of years because he hadn't had to face Saban in those SEC championship
Right.
games. This time he has to. So we'll see how this thing really shapes up because it's going to get very, very interesting. But Georgia has the biggest pressure on them because
Yeah.
it's almost you know, I don't know, it's just tough for them because you're in a hard spot, man. You won 27 games in a row. And now you got to beat your predecessor. You got to beat your boss pretty much for
I know.
years to get to where you want to get to. That's
Yep.
hard because he knows you. He hired you, and y'all both know each other's defenses because y'all run similar defenses. So
Yeah.
that's why I say it's going to be a chess match.
It really, really will, and so much riding on it for both of these teams. I will actually be calling this one. I will be on the call for Westwood One, which is the national radio broadcast for the game. So if you are listening, I will be down on the sideline. So I am not allowed to pick because that would provide bias, and I'm not allowed to do that. So, but I like your stance on things, Jay, and I think you provided some great analysis that I do happen to agree with. A lot of ripple effects to come off of these results. And then we will find out who is in the top four, who will be vying for that national championship, playing in the playoffs. We will also find out bowl assignments. So make sure you stay locked with us. Subscribe if you haven't already. We do this podcast year round, even when it's not football. So make sure you lock with us and tell your friends that we're not going away just because football's coming to a close. We'll start diving into some basketball coverage here soon. So come on back next week. Subscribe if you haven't already. It'll give you a notification every time we release an episode. Follow us both on social media. Our handles are conveniently located at the bottom of the screen if you are watching on YouTube, which we do every week, and are on Bleav's YouTube channel. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts or the video element on YouTube. Enjoy conference championship weekend. War Eagle.
Peace.